one of the things that we've talked about this year was this idea of how to think. So we did 3. I was really appreciative of the way that you received this. And if you think back to the second of 3 parts in the series, we talked about thoughts that we didn't know we even had and why they matter. So for example, the fundamental attribution error says that other people do bad things because they're bad. We do bad things because nobody's perfect and we made an honest mistake. So a great example, again, is the driving example. Somebody else makes a bad decision because they're a bad driver and probably an idiot. We just made it wasn't even that big of a deal. A lot of people do worse. Like, get off me, right? That's what we do. We give ourselves grace and we give others judgment. Or the confirmation bias, right? So if you follow, like right now, so I'm a sports guy, so NBA playoffs is going right now. And there's lots of time in between each playoff games for a lot of people to either think they're super smart because their prediction came true, or if their prediction didn't come true, find reasons why they're still smart, but the team just screwed up. Confirmation bias. The halo effect. This is a big one. We all have qualities and characteristics that we find attractive and desirable. So when other people have those qualities, we automatically think better of them, and we assume the goodness goes across the board. Whereas somebody else who might be just as qualified, if not more qualified, or has a different set of categories, doesn't get a second look. And all of these thoughts take place before we ever actually consciously think. And so that's why we ask the question, why do I think that? Where did I learn that? Where's that being reinforced? Where did that come from? Because our thoughts aren't random. And the idea was to take every thought and make it captive to Christ. That was kind of the big idea of the whole series. So as we continue our look into this reconciliation series, we're going to talk about something today that is a reality for many, and a lot of people don't even know it. They don't even see it. We just assume the way the world is the way the world is. And my reality is reality. And for you, your reality is reality. And so we need to take a deeper look into what's behind a certain element of this series, which we have not touched yet. So these are, by way of review, these were the 3 goals that we had for this series, and will continue to be goals for this series, because we're not done this year. We're not closing the door on this topic at the end of the school year. We don't even have the door all the way open yet. So this is going to continue next year and the years beyond. But I want you to take a look at this first one here. BCS students and faculty will gain understanding of how race issues, or racist issues if you made a typo like I did, both personally and institutionally perpetuate injustices related to power, privilege, and equality. And so we're going to look today at a topic that's really important, that's deep, that's meaningful, and may not be something that you've ever thought about, or something that you think about a lot because it is your reality. All right? So our guest today, who has been with us before, Pastor Peter, who got us started way back when, he's going to come today back again, so give him a big welcome as he talks about something that he'll unpack for you here, and then when he's done, I'll hit you up with some announcements, and we'll be good to go. So please welcome Peter Chin back to the stage.
Thanks, Mike. All right, cool. It is good for me to be back here with you all. Kind of circling back, I think I was the first speaker of this chapel series. Is that right, Mike? Okay. So I was the very first chapel speaker, and I think I'm close to the end now. And I've kind of touched base with Mr. Olson and Mrs. Braystead about some of the things you guys have talked about, some of the conversations you've had in the middle time from when I started. And I just wanted to start off by saying good job to all of you. Some of these conversations, this is hard stuff. This is stuff that I've seen adults, who are working in careers, who are, have kids or grandkids. They can't take this conversation very long before they have to bug out because it's just too much for them, Right? These are hard conversations. For you guys to stick with it for this long, to engage with it, and to try to learn from it, this is really good stuff. And so you may not realize that. You may just think, oh yeah, I'm listening to these speakers or whatever Mr. Olson's putting out there. But I want you to know the truth that there are a lot of adults that are running away from these conversations because they can't take it. And yet here you guys are sitting and learning and trying to grow as a result. So that's really good stuff. And I think you guys need to give yourself a hand of applause. You can go ahead and do that if you want to, because all right, that's enough applause. But honestly, this is really hard work. And I think you guys need to realize and be proud of yourself for engaging with it in a conversation that a lot of people would rather just run away from if they had the choice. And I have no idea how to work this. So I just press the arrow? Is that? Okay. What I wanted to introduce to you today is a really important topic. And I know it's important because it transformed the way that I thought about race and power and privilege, all that stuff that Mr. Olson just put up there. This one idea really was a hinge point that changed how I believed and what I thought about race and racism. And so I just want to introduce this idea of one more type of racism that you may not know about that's really important, that may change your framework of how you understand this whole topic. So let's talk about racism and what we imagine when we think about racism, about racists, right? Even for a moment, when you think about that word racism, you think about who a racist is, think about the images or the definitions you might come up with, right? Just in your seats, do that for a moment. And I would suspect that for many of us, the image of racism and of a racist is something like this guy right here, right? You guys know the Ku Klux Klan or a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi, someone who consciously chooses to hate another person. They look at a person and because of their color, because of the nation of origin, they decide that they want to hate this person, and that is a racist. That's racism, right? I think we would all agree that's racist, and that's what racism is. It's when a person decides that they want to hate another person. If you do that, that makes you a racist. And what that activity is, that's racism. And that's generally how we think about racism. And what that is, and when you kind of clarify or focus that idea a little more, it's not just racism, but what is called is personal bigotry. Personal bigotry is just that idea we're just talking about. It's the idea that when one person decides, when they look at a person, that they're going to despise them or treat them differently because of the color of their skin, shape of their eyes, the nation that they come from, that's personal bigotry. And for many of us, and I would say for adults as well as students here, this oftentimes is our sole definition of what racism is. The only reason why racism exists is because of personal bigotry, because people decide to do this thing right here where they treat someone differently because of the racial or ethnic group and they treat them with hatred or intolerance. This, for many of us, is our main definition of what racism is, when someone decides to hate another person. Let me just see a show of hands. Is this kind of pretty similar to what you would define racism? If you had to write it out like in a test, go ahead and raise your hand if you would say, yeah, that's pretty close to what you would imagine racism to be. Okay, I would say like 50, 60% of us would say, yeah, racism is when you hate another person because of the color of their skin or whatever, their physical features, those kinds of things, right? And so it's really an issue about a person hating another person. So 3 aspects of this definition of racism that I want to point out. And first off, this definition of racism is very one-dimensional. It's just an issue of one person's decision. That's what everything racism is. That means that racism that we see everywhere is basically a problem with one person's decisions to hate another person. It's very easy. It's very simple. All you got to do is deal with that one thing. Another aspect of this kind of racism, this racism that comes out of personal decision, personal bigotry, is that it's not an issue that really applies to many people because not many people make that decision. Right? If racism really is about a personal decision that I make or you make to hate another person, most of us could probably say, I never made that decision. I didn't decide to hate him. I don't hate anyone like that, so that means I'm not a racist because I didn't make a decision like that. So if this is the understanding of racism, then none of us are racist. Or very, very few of us, I would assume, in this room are racist because none of us make these decisions usually. This really means those really bad people out there that we see in the news, people who wear hoods and burn crosses, that's who the racists are, but no one else because, again, racism is just that personal choice. The third aspect of this conception of racism is that it's a very personal issue of heart and sin. And this is the definition of racism that I think Christians love and use the most, that racism is all about sin and it's about the heart. And the whole reason why racism exists is because people have sin in their hearts, and they out of that sin they hate people, and they hate people for dumb reasons, like the color of their hair or what their hair feels like or whatever these reasons are. That's a sin thing. And it's a heart thing. And because of the sin in a person's heart, they decide to hate another person, and that's where racism comes from. Right? And Christians love this because that's very much the language that we use. We use the language of heart and sin and those kind of things to talk about the problems in the world. And so this, by and large, if you go to churches, you talk to Christians, they use this definition of racism because it fits very well with the things that we talk about. And it's true. Racism is part of sin. Our brokenness inside, the brokenness that we have in our soul, does cause us to hate people just like this in this sense of personal bigotry. So this, again, like I said, I think is a very dominant, very common understanding of the idea of racism. It's about a personal decision to hate another person. And that means to solve it, to solve the whole problem of racism from here on out, is very easy. Because all you got to do then is that you have to just make sure you take care of the person's heart. That if you can get rid of hatred in one person's heart, you got rid of racism for the rest of time. Makes sense, right? If racism is all about what a person does in their heart, you deal with the heart, and everything kind of falls into place. Racism would evaporate in a second if we could do that. Does that make sense to you guys? If it's an issue of the heart. So, I want to propose an answer to this question. I forgot to bring out my phone, but I wanted to do a little exercise with you guys today. And I'm going to see if you like the same movies as I do. Anyone seen Men in Black before? Go ahead and raise your hand if you've seen Men in Black. Men in Black is one of my all-time favorite movies. I've got all three of the movies at home. And why I love these movies, one of the reasons is the alien technology they have throughout the movies, one of them being the neuralizer. You guys know what the neuralizer is? Do I have to explain it? I think I got to explain it. Okay. The neuralizer is, so basically Men in Black, what they do is they kind of cover up the existence of aliens. They work with aliens. They cover up the existence of aliens. And one of the ways in which they do that is through this alien piece of technology that they call a neuralizer. And the neuralizer, what they do is they flash it in someone's face, and what happens? They forget everything. And then all they have to do is they have to say something to them, and that becomes like their new memory. They basically can just like tell them a new memory right off the bat. And that's what a neuralizer does. Okay? And so they have an app for it as well, and I have it on my phone. And so I'm going to use a neuralizer today for the purposes of our discussion. Because if racism is a heart issue, if we can take that out, then everyone's going to be the same afterwards, right? If we could actually plant a new memory in someone that people could treat each other the same, the moment that happens, all inequality will cease. We'll see each other exactly the same, right? It makes sense. So I'm gonna do a couple of exercises with us. I'm asking for 2 volunteers. We're gonna do this 3 times. So go ahead and raise your hand. Are we doing a volunteer kind of crowd, or do I gotta pick people? So we got one person in the back and one person right here. Why don't you guys come up here if you could? What, the family reunion or something? Literally? Are you guys brothers? That's crazy. Must be genetics or something in the water. All right, awesome. It's perfect for you guys. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is they're going to role play something, okay? And then I'm going to neuralize them. Okay, so let's just set the stage. If you guys have done improv or drama or that kind of stuff, let's just set the stage with guys. What are you guys' names?
Ash.
Ash and?
Connor.
Colin?
Connor.
Connor, good to meet you guys. All right, so what I want you guys to imagine today is this, is that the year is 1776. Okay, it is 1776. Yeah, that's right. That's great. Good. Your history teacher will be proud of you. Ash, you're going to be a white colonist. You're going to be one of the colonists that came here from England, from the Puritans, and kind of just settled down in 1776, okay? All right, Connor, you are going to be one of the First Nations people. You were already here before Ash and his family got here. You've been here for centuries, for millennia, have developed a relationship with this land and all that kind of stuff, okay? So you guys are 1776, a First Nations person and a white colonist, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to neuralize you guys right now, okay? So if you could step this way, please, and go ahead and look right into this thing right here. Okay, and I'm going to plant a memory into your, I'm going to plant something into your heads right now, okay? And that is this, that you guys are completely equal. You're equal in the sight of this government, in the sight of this country, in the sight of God, in the sight of one another, okay? I just planted that in your head right now, okay? So when you look at each other, go ahead and look at each other. You guys are completely equal, right? So cool. We did it. We totally erased racism right in that moment. Even though these guys were totally different. One guy's like a First Nations, person. Other was a white colonist. Look at these guys. I mean, they're like brothers now. It's so weird that they're brothers. So they're completely equal. But the thing is, after you get equal, after you've been neuralized, you got to go back to your homes, you got to go back to your towns, and you got to still live in the context in which you live. And so let me just read something that I think would be very informative for your time period. I want you to listen carefully to what I'm going to read. This is from the Declaration of Independence. This is talking about King George. He says, "He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions." Okay? And that's really fancy kind of talk, but what essentially that is saying to you is that King George, one of the problems that we have with him, he's stirring up the First Nations people, and these First Nations people, all they want to do is destroy. They don't care about whether it's a man or a woman or a child or adult. These people are merciless savages, okay? Now, let me ask you this question. I neuralized you guys. You guys are the same. You guys are the same in every single way. When you read something like that, do you feel like you're on the same page in this society, in this country? Even after reading that, you feel like you're on the same page? No, not really. Why? Who's up and who's down in this situation? Do we have a microphone we could pass around?
In this situation,
You would be higher.
I'm seen as a merciless killer, and morally, people would be against that, and he's now being seen as somebody who's going to come and end this horrible threat.
Right.
And me, minding my own business out in the woods,
Yeah.
and with my people, just looks over and sees him with his pitchforks, wondering, why?
Yeah. And so the weird thing is, though, where did you get this sense of inequality? Did you get it because you guys looked at each other and hated each other? Is that where that inequality came from? Where did you get this sense that one person's up and one person's down? One person's the savior, one person's a merciless savage. Where did you actually get that then?
One figurehead.
Well, it could be a variety of things. It could be because
Here, you take it.
the other civilization might be more advanced.
Okay.
Because-
Well, how about from right now? I neuralized you.
Yeah.
And so you guys were on the same page. But what happened? What keyed you in to differences between you two? Was it because of how you felt about one another? Is that why you knew you were different?
Looks.
Yeah, it's because of what? Because of the thing I read, right?
Yeah.
Because of the Declaration of Independence.
Yes.
Okay, so it was the Declaration of Independence that keyed you into something you didn't feel necessarily, but that you realized you're unequal.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, let's do that. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, let's do that one more time. So if I could have two more volunteers. Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, one person right there. And then this young man right here, okay. Oh, okay, we'll get you next time. So young man right here. And then I think I saw a young woman. If you could raise, did you want to come up? Please do. All right. Let's get some names here. Names, please.
Ray.
Brian?
Ray.
Ray?
Ray.
Ray. Sorry, Ray. That's my fault.
Mia.
Mia. Ray and Mia. All right, Ray and Mia. All right, same kind of thing. It's like an improv thing. Let's set the stage for you guys, okay? It's not 1776 anymore. Now it's 1787, okay? 1787. Just imagine yourself. It is now 1787, okay? Mia, for the sake of what we're going to talk about now, you are an American citizen. Right now, it's 1787. It's past the War of Independence, so you're now American citizen. You're a white American citizen at this point. Okay? Ray, you are a black slave. Okay? You are a black slave. So you guys are very different, right? But I'm going to go ahead and neuralize you to make sure that you guys kind of look at each other the same way. So we're going to do the same thing. So go ahead and come a little closer for a second. If you could please look here for a moment. All right. So I'm going to tell you this. I just completely blanked out your memory. I'm going to tell you this. You guys are equal in the sight of God, equal in the sight of this country, and equal in the sight of one another. Okay? Go ahead and take a look at each other. All right? Shake hands. All right. See, they're totally cool. We just got rid of that. They have no hostility towards each other at all. There's no hatred. There's no personal bigotry at all there. We just totally, look at this. I mean, this is amazing stuff. Apps can do anything nowadays. But now that you're sitting here, you got to go back to your towns. You got to go back to where you were. And I'm going to go ahead and read this for you, okay? And this is what it says in the U.S. Constitution. And this is from 1787. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union, according to the respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. That's really fancy legal talk again. But what this is basically saying is, you know, the United States had to determine how much to tax people, how much representation to bring to government. And the way that they figured out who was a person that you would count to know how many representatives you would have a white citizen, a male white citizen would be counted as one person, and you would have a black slave being 3/5 of a human being. So Ray, you would not be a full person, you would be a 3/5 of a person. And then if we actually talked about Connor, who was a First Nations person, he's not a person at all. He wouldn't count whatsoever. Okay? So let me ask you those same questions again. If you guys want to take this microphone real fast. Tell me, do you guys, once you read this, do you feel like you're equal in this country?
Nope.
How about you, Mia?
Nope.
Not really. Who's up and who's down in this situation?
I have to say she or
Mia, let's just call her Mia for now.
I just think Mia is more up than me because I'm a slave and I'm like 3/5 or I'm like considered property and she's considered like a full she's like considered a full person.
Yeah, Mia, how about you? You feel the same way? Do you think that does make sense?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, like, just the fact that I'm just one person and then Ray is not even like considered a full human being, just 3/4 of a person, just shows that he doesn't have the same rights as I do.
That's so interesting. So let me ask you the question, why do you feel that way? How did you know that you're not equal? Was it because of how you felt towards one another, that you looked at each other and you hated each other? Is that why you saw that you were unequal? Is that how you knew it? Because of the hatred that you feel towards each other? Well, maybe you guys do dislike each other. I don't even know. That's possible, I guess. But just for the sake of today, is that why you knew you were unequal? Because of your feelings towards each other? What clued you in to the fact that you were not the same kind of person in this country?
I think just the fact that we're different races and different privileges have a certain say in the matter. Yeah,
sure. Different privileges. Ray, what do you think?
I kind of think it's like also like how you're kind of positioned because she's like considered a white male, which they're basically free, they're allowed to vote, they're allowed to do everything, and then I'm just someone who's down. I'm just someone who picks cotton fields for these white people, and I'm like kneading their clothes or something. Okay. I'm like considered property at the time, and she's like considered a being that actually a real human being that eats and drinks, while I'm just someone who just does everything for them.
Okay. Ray's really passionate about this.
I'm kind of like a dog or a cat. I basically do whatever they say.
To be honest, they were treated like livestock more than anything else. Thank you guys very much. We're going to take a seat real fast. Okay, so again, it wasn't hatred that clued them into their differences. It was their differences in their kind of what the government tells them, but also their position, right? One's a slave and what's not. It's an institution, okay? Let's move on to one more example, and I'm just kind of going to go through this for the sake of time. So let's imagine there are two people here again, right? And these two people, one of them, we're going to move a little bit forward in time, a whole century to the year 1882. Let's maybe just for the sake of surprise, it's 1882. And we're going to have two people, and these two people are now, again, a white citizen of the United States, and the second person is a Chinese laborer in 1882. Believe it or not, some of us often don't know this, but one of the main sources of manual labor in this country in the 19th century didn't come from Mexico or from Latin America or the places we typically think about. It came from China. That many of the people who were working railroads throughout this country were from China. And so many people came that eventually the government didn't like that very much. But for the sake of the argument, we got two people here again. I'm going to neuralize and take away any of the hatred, any of that anger towards them, and just say, you guys are clear. We're taking all that stuff out, okay? But then they got to go home and they got to read something like this, where it says this in 1882. Whereas in the opinion of the government of the United States, the coming of Chinese laborers to this country endangers the good order of certain localities within the territory thereof. Again, it's fancy legal language, which is often used to say, we don't want you here anymore. And this would be the beginning of the Chinese Exclusion Act, the first racial piece of immigration enacted by the U.S. government saying, we don't want any more Chinese people to come to this country. And as a result of that legislation, actually acts of violence started to occur against Chinese laborers. One of them not happening too far away from here in Oregon at what's called Chinese Massacre Cove. Just 5, I think, years after that moment, after the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, over 30 Chinese laborers were killed by other workers for being Chinese. Okay? And so when you think about this moment, let's say if I neuralize two people and all the anger's taken out, all the hatred's taken out, but then they read something like this, and they read the news like this, they automatically know it's not hatred that clues them into whether someone's up or down. It's the laws, it's the news, it's everything around them that makes them realize that there's a difference between them. You see what I mean? Okay? What I'm trying to demonstrate for you guys is this. Is that racism may start in the human heart, but it doesn't remain there because it becomes embedded into the structures and institutions of our culture, right? So again, racism may start with the hatred that we have towards someone. That's definitely true, and I agree with that. It's a sin problem, it's a heart problem. Because we're so sinful, we hate people for ridiculous reasons like we were talking about. But what happens when you, out of that hate, create a law, or you create a business, or you create a TV show, or you create a media company, and that goes with you into that place. It goes into that institution. And then even after you leave or you die, whatever you created and whatever was going on in your mind when you had that heart also got into that place, into that courtroom, into what the laws that you passed, the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or whatever it might be. Then it's not so much about how you feel, because that racism, that inequality got embedded, it got encoded into the structures that you are around you, into the institutions that were around you as well. And this is the idea of institutional racism. That racism isn't just something that exists in your heart that you feel towards another person. It can actually exist in schools. It can exist in government. It can exist in documents that outlive any single person. And so even if you fixed a person, even if that person died, the racism that they had can continue on and be perpetuated in the culture that they created. Does this make sense to you guys? You're seeing what happens here? Now, a couple of differences between the understanding of personal bigotry and institutional racism that I want to point out to you. The first is this, is that racism in this understanding is not a single issue, but it's a multidimensional problem. With that other understanding of racism we talked about the heart stuff, it's easy. All you got to do is talk to a person and get the racism out of their heart, and then you're done with it. And the whole thing will be done. You're neuralizing racism all in one moment. But if racism isn't just about the individual, but all the culture that a person creates and engages in, the laws that are created, the documents that we create, the TV shows that we make, everything that we do, then if you take it out of one person, you've only done half the battle, right? Because it's still out there. It's still in the laws. It's still in every single thing that that person has engaged with and created. So now it's not a simple problem anymore of just the human heart. The other difference between personal bigotry and institutional racism is that this is something that applies to all of us. To all of us. You remember with personal bigotry, someone just straight up hating another folk, right? That idea. Well, I'd say 99% of us don't do that. And so we would never be bigots. We would never be racist. We don't qualify for racism under that understanding of racism. But if racism isn't just about how you feel about a person, but it's about how racism and inequality and hatred gets embedded into laws, the government, into culture itself, we're all a part of that. We're all doing that in some way. We're all consuming culture and media. We're all a part of schools. We're all a part of a government. We're all a part of those things. So, but guess what? Even if you're not actively hating other people in this country because of whatever the case might be, you might be a part of a system that is unequal. And you might be bolstering and participating in that systemic institutional racism, even if you're not personally a bigot. The third thing that we should understand about this understanding of bigotry, of racism, it doesn't quite fit with the traditional Christian explanation of racism. If you remember at the start, I said that racism, generally the church loves to talk about it as that sin thing, a heart thing, right? It's because we have sin in our hearts, so we hate people in racism. That's all that it is. That's all that it is. And so all we got to deal with ultimately is that problem of sin in our hearts. But this understanding of racism, that racism doesn't just remain rooted here, but it flows and it embeds and it corrupts things all around us in culture and institutions around us. We don't know what to do with that with Christians. We don't talk about that stuff. We like to talk about the spirit and the soul and the heart. And so when we talk about racism, we talk about it being a heart kind of thing, and all we got to do is talk about the heart. When we talk about being outside the heart, we talk about being part of laws. We talk about being part of Congress or the Declaration of Independence. We don't know what to do. That's not what we talk about. And we feel like we don't have anything to do as Christians. We got nothing to say. We got no weapons here. We have no history to take care of racism outside of this place inside of my chest. That's the only place I can take care of it. And so we feel powerless. A lot of churches feel powerless. And I think sometimes you as young people, you inherit that. And you think that you're powerless against institutional racism because Christians, we don't care about that stuff. What I want to end here today is I want to tell you that's not true. That the church, throughout its history, has always dealt with hatred both inside the human heart as well as the institutions in which it existed as well. That's what they did all along. And a great example of this comes from the early church. Maybe some of you guys know this, some of you don't. One of the big problems, issues of the early church, we're talking about the book of Acts of the Apostles, which maybe some of you guys know. One of the big issues of the Acts of the Apostles is this division between Jewish people and non-Jewish people called Gentiles. You guys, you know that probably that term Gentiles, right? And those people didn't get along because before the Jewish people had for so long saw themselves as the chosen people. They were the children of God. They were the descendants of Abraham. They were supposed to be special in God's eyes. And now through Jesus, now non-Jewish people are here. Now we got Greeks here. Now we got Romans here who are occupying Jerusalem. And they didn't like that. They didn't like that. And so they would put down the Gentiles. They would say, no, you shouldn't get the same things as we get, as the Hebrews get. And you got to do some really painful things to be a part of our people. And we're not going to hang out with you either. And they would do that same kind of thing. They had essentially racism. They had this hatred that existed in the early church. And so the church took care of it. But thinking how we think today, we would think they would just kind of a heart-to-heart with people, right? They would just go up to folks who have that hate in their heart and say, hey, you got to love, man. You got to love these Gentile people, these non-Jewish people. And that's the extent of how they would take care of that issue, just to make sure they got the heart thing, because that's all the Christians do. All we deal with is we make sure that the heart's clear. But that's not what they did at all. not only would they talk about the heart, they would make sure that every single possible thing happened to make sure that these non-Jewish people were still part of this family. They created a whole nother level of leadership to make sure that non-Jewish people got treated equal. Do you ever heard of a deacon before? You ever that name, ever heard of that before at a church? It's a level of church leadership, right? That maybe some of you guys have heard of. That word deacon comes from the book of Acts. It was a level of leadership created solely for the purpose to make sure that Greek widows were treated the same as Jewish ones. They didn't just have a heart-to-heart. They created a whole other brand of leadership to make sure that would happen. They rebuked their highest level leaders when they wouldn't treat people the same. Peter, the Apostle Peter. Raise your hand if you guys know the Apostle Peter. If you don't, you guys need some biblical instruction. Okay, Apostle Peter. Apostle Peter was one of those guys who realized that non-Jewish people are part of the church, but then he went back on it. He went back on it and he said, you know what, I'm not going to eat with these people no more. I'm not going to eat with non-Jewish folk. I don't even want to be around them. He's the highest leader in all of the early church. And Paul went up to him and he says, you're wrong. You're wrong for doing that. They would call out their highest level leaders for doing these kind of things. The first council of the early church ever was based around this topic, around treating people the same. They gathered everyone for the first council of Jerusalem. And they would craft letters and craft theology to support the inclusion of the Gentiles. You guys hear about the book of Ephesians, you hear about the book of Galatians. What those books of the Bible were they were establishing theology so that people could look at each other as brothers and sisters instead of Jews and Gentiles. That's why Paul will say in Galatians, there is no Jew or Gentile, slave or free, man or woman. That's why he'll say in Ephesians that through the blood of Christ we are now one humanity, not two separate ones. They did everything to make sure that there was equality and there was fairness and there was a real sense of family in the early church. They didn't just do heart-to-hearts. They chased down that hatred everywhere that would go. They would talk to senior leaders. They would create senior leaders. They would write things. They would do anything that they could to make sure that these people got a fair shake at things. What I want to leave with you guys is this. The work of the Christian is not only to address the personal sin of racism, it is also to dismantle racism in every institution and in structure in which it has taken root. And I want you guys to reprogram your understanding of what your calling is in this